A freezing night. A barefoot girl clutches a baby and begs a cold, reclusive millionaire to let them in. He refuses, until she does something that stops him dead in his tracks. What she says next breaks through years of silence and opens a door he thought he had sealed forever. What could a child possibly say that would shatter a man like that? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. On a cold winter morning, Dino Graves opened his eyes precisely at 5:30 a.m., just as he had done every day for the past 20 years. The mansion was silent around him, its 37 rooms empty of laughter or life. Outside his window, snow fell in quiet determination, coating the grounds in pristine white. Dino slipped his feet into leather slippers and stood, his movements mechanical. The enormous bedroom felt hollow around him, decorated with expensive furniture that had never known the bounce of a child or the casual clutter of family life. "Good morning, Mr. Graves," said Mrs. Porter, his housekeeper, as she entered with his pressed suit for the day. Her eyes remained downcast, her voice professionally distant. No one in the house ever looked directly at him anymore. "Morning," he replied, the word clipped and cold. Breakfast awaited him in the east dining room, a room that could seat 30, but held only him at its head. The chef had prepared his usual: 2 poached eggs, whole grain toast, black coffee. The staff moved like shadows around him, refilling his cup without being asked, clearing plates the moment he finished. Dino ate methodically, scanning business reports rather than engaging in conversation. The silence was complete, comfortable in its familiarity. He had built his life this way, controlled, predictable, safe from emotional disruption. Later that day, Dino walked through the west corridor of the mansion, his footsteps echoing on marble floors. The hallway stretched before him, lined with gilded frames containing generations of Graves family portraits. Great-grandparents, grandparents, his stern father, and then himself, each face more closed off than the last. But there was a gap in the display, a blank space on the wall where a portrait should have hung. Dino stopped before it, his face hardening as he stared at the emptiness. Lena Graves, his daughter. 20 years ago, she had stormed out of this very house after words that could never be taken back. Words he had hurled at her in anger when she announced she was abandoning college to pursue art in Europe. "You're throwing away everything I built for you," he had shouted. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." She hadn't. And the space on the wall remained empty, a daily reminder of his greatest failure. As evening fell, the gentle snowfall transformed into a raging storm. Wind howled against the windows, and ice pellets tapped against glass like impatient fingers. The security phone buzzed in Dino's study. "Sir," came the guard's voice, "there's someone at the main gate. A young girl with a baby, sir." Dino frowned. At this hour? In this weather? Tell her to leave. "She's insisting on seeing you personally, Mr. Graves. Says it's about your daughter." Dino's heart stuttered. "My daughter has been gone for 20 years. Tell her to leave or I'll call the police." "Yes, sir." Dino returned to his papers, but minutes later the phone buzzed again. "Sir, I'm sorry, but she won't go. She's standing in the rain, no shoes, holding this baby, and sir, she's singing." Through the phone came a faint melody, a simple lullaby, the notes rising and falling in a pattern Dino hadn't heard in 2 decades. Lena's lullaby, the one she had created herself as a child. Dino's hand froze on the desk. The papers beneath his fingers trembled. "Sir, what should I do about the girl?" Dino couldn't speak. The lullaby had stopped him cold, transporting him instantly to bedtime stories and a small hand in his, to a time before everything broke. "Sir?" "Bring her in," Dino whispered, his voice suddenly hoarse. "Bring her in now." Just then, Dino pushed past his security guard and stepped into the raging storm. The wind immediately slashed at his face, and freezing rain soaked through his expensive suit. But he barely noticed. His eyes fixed on the small figure at the gate, a girl no older than 12, drenched to the bone, clutching a bundle to her chest. "Who are you?" Dino demanded, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind. "How do you know that song?" The girl's eyes widened with hope when she saw him, Her dark hair was plastered to her face, her thin coat offering little protection against the elements. She clutched the bundle tighter as Dino approached. "Please," she begged, her teeth chattering. "He's sick. We have nowhere else to go." Dino stared at her, then at the bundle. A tiny face peeked out, flushed with fever. The girl's lip trembled, but she lifted her chin with determination. "His name is Noah. He's Lena's son." Her eyes, large and desperate, locked with Dino's. "Your grandson." The world tilted beneath Dino's feet. He reached out, steadying himself against the gate. Lena's son. The words echoed in his mind, impossible yet undeniable. "Open the gate," he ordered the guard, his voice unrecognizable even to himself. The security guard rushed to comply, and Dino stepped forward, instinctively reaching for the child. The girl hesitated before allowing him to take the bundle. Noah was burning with fever, his small face scrunched in discomfort. "Come," Dino said, wrapping his free arm around the girl's shoulders. "Quickly." They hurried through the storm toward the mansion. Janet, the housekeeper, gasped when they entered, dripping water onto the marble floor. "Mr. Graves, what on earth?" "Call Dr. Hart." "Now," Dino commanded. "Tell him it's an emergency." Janet's eyes widened at the bundle in his arms, but she nodded and rushed to the phone. The girl took 2 steps forward, then swayed dangerously. Her eyes rolled back, and before Dino could react, she collapsed onto the floor. "Janet!" Dino shouted, clutching Noah tighter. "Help!" The next hour passed in a blur. Dr. Emilio Hart arrived within 20 minutes, his medical bag in hand, face grave as he examined both children. The girl, Larita, according to the worn ID bracelet on her wrist, had been moved to a guest bedroom. Noah remained in Dino's arms until the doctor gently insisted on examining him. "Severe exhaustion and mild hypothermia for the girl," Dr. Hart explained as he worked. "The baby has an ear infection and is dehydrated, but it's treatable. They both need rest, warmth, and fluids." He looked up at Dino, curiosity evident in his eyes. "May I ask who these children are?" Dino stared at the baby's face, at features that suddenly seemed so familiar. Lena's nose, his own chin. "Family," he said simply. Dr. Hart nodded, understanding the conversation was over. "I'll stay until they're stabilized." Janet had prepared the blue guest room, the one closest to Dino's suite. She had found children's medicine in the staff quarters and clean clothes that might fit Larita. The baby was wrapped in the softest blankets the house could provide. Dino sat beside Larita's bed long after Dr. Hart had administered antibiotics to Noah and ensured both children were out of immediate danger. The girl's face was peaceful in sleep, though occasionally she would murmur something indistinct. Around midnight, her eyes fluttered open. She immediately tried to sit up. "Noah!" she gasped. "He's right here," Dino assured her, gesturing to the makeshift crib Janet had created from a drawer. "The doctor says he'll be fine. He's sleeping now." Larita relaxed slightly, sinking back into the pillows. Her eyes, now alert, studied Dino's face. "You look like her pictures," she whispered. Dino's throat tightened. "Lena," he said, not a question. Larita nodded. "I followed Mama Lena's map." Her voice was soft, barely audible. "She said, if something happened, go to the house with the red roof and the white stones." Dino closed his eyes briefly. The description of his estate, simplified for a child to understand. "Where is she?" he asked, dreading the answer. Larita's eyes filled with tears. "Gone," she whispered. "The sickness took her 3 weeks ago." The word hit Dino like a physical blow. Gone. 20 years of silence and now this final, permanent separation. No chance to apologize. No opportunity to make things right. "She left the map," Larita continued, pulling a folded, water-stained paper from her pocket. "She said you would help us." Dino took the paper with trembling hands. Unfolding it revealed a child's drawing, clearly done by Lena, showing a winding path to a house with a distinctive red roof and white stone walls. His house. The map was decorated with hearts and stars, with Grandpa's house written in Lena's artistic script. Memories crashed over Dino. Lena as a little girl drawing pictures for him that he'd been too busy to properly appreciate. Lena as a teenager trying to show him her art portfolio while he checked his emails. Lena at 18, tears streaming down her face as she walked out of his life. And now she was gone forever, leaving behind these two children and a map that showed she had never completely given up on him. "She trusted me," Dino whispered, the realization overwhelming him. "After everything." "She said you were good," Loretta murmured, her eyes growing heavy again. "Just scared of loving too much." Dino sat in silence, the map clutched in his hand, as guilt and grief washed over him in waves. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, something long frozen in Dino Graves had begun, painfully, to thaw. Earlier that day, Loretta had huddled beneath a concrete bridge, her thin jacket pulled tight around both her and baby Noah. The winter wind cut through the fabric like knives, but she positioned herself to take the brunt of it, creating a small pocket of warmth for the infant. "Just a little longer," she whispered, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "We're almost there." Noah whimpered softly, his tiny face pinched with discomfort. Loretta reached into her backpack, one of the few possessions she'd managed to bring, and pulled out a worn envelope. Inside was a letter, the paper soft from countless readings and a hand-drawn map. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it again, tracing the familiar route with her fingertip. The map showed streets and landmarks, simplified but clear, leading to a house with a distinctive red roof and white stones. "Mama Lena said he might not be kind," she told Noah, tucking the blanket more securely around him. "But he's all we got now, your grandpa. She said deep down, he has a good heart. He just forgot how to show it." She carefully refolded the letter, Lena's last words to her, written when she knew she wouldn't recover. The instructions were clear. Find Dino Graves. Make sure Noah is safe. "I promised her," Loretta whispered, kissing Noah's forehead. "And I'm going to keep that promise." Now, in the quiet of the guest bedroom, Dino sat watching Loretta sleep. In his hands was a small, worn teddy bear, faded brown fur patched in several places, one eye missing and replaced with a button that didn't quite match. Lena's bear. He'd found it in a box in his closet, one of the few childhood items he'd never been able to bring himself to discard. The lullaby Loretta had sung at the gate played in his mind on repeat. How many times had he heard Lena sing that same melody to this bear? How many nights had he stood in her doorway, watching from a distance, never entering, never participating? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Hart entered, his expression grave. "Mr. Graves, I've completed a more thorough examination of the baby," he said quietly. "I'm concerned. Noah is significantly undernourished. His weight is well below what it should be for his age." Dino's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with sudden anger. "Undernourished? You mean she's been starving him?" "I didn't say that," Dr. Hart cautioned. "There could be many." "I did everything I could," came Loretta's small voice from the bed. She had awakened and was watching them with exhausted eyes. "Every bit of food we had, I gave to him first." Dino turned to her, his face hard. "Then why is he in this condition? If you were taking proper care of him—" "Proper care?" Loretta's voice cracked. "After Mama Lena died, we had nowhere to go. The landlord locked us out. I had to choose between bus fare to find you or buying more formula." Tears welled in her eyes. "I did my best. I've been doing my best since she got sick." "Why didn't you come sooner?" Dino demanded, though his tone had softened slightly. Loretta looked away. "Mama Lena didn't want to burden you, she said. She said you made it clear long ago that you didn't want to be bothered." She swallowed hard. "It was only when she knew she was dying that she gave me the map." The words hit Dino like a physical blow. He looked down at the teddy bear in his hands, then back at the frail girl who had crossed who knew how many miles to bring his grandson to safety. The next morning, Dino stood by the window in his study, watching the first light break across the snow-covered grounds. He hadn't slept. His mind had been too full of questions, memories, and a growing unease that threatened the carefully constructed walls of his life. Behind him, Loretta sat in an oversized armchair, Noah sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby looked better already after a night of proper care and formula. "Who are you?" Dino finally asked, turning to face her. "Really, I need the truth now." Loretta met his gaze steadily. "I told you the truth. Noah is Lena's son, your grandson." "But you're not her daughter," Dino pressed. It wasn't a question. Loretta looked down at Noah, adjusting his blanket. "I'm her goddaughter. Mama Lena took me in when my own mother died 3 years ago. She was all I had." "Was?" The word hung in the air. "She died 2 months ago. There was a fire at the shelter where we were staying." Loretta's voice grew quiet. "She got Noah out first, then came back for me. The smoke was too much." Dino gripped the windowsill behind him, his knuckles white. "A shelter? Lena was living in a shelter?" Loretta nodded, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded, crumpled piece of paper. "She wrote this. She made me promise I'd only come to you if there was no other choice." Dino took the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting was unmistakably Lena's, the same looping script she'd used since high school. "Loretta, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. Take care of Noah. Never go to Dino. He threw me out when I told him I was pregnant. He said he didn't want the shame of an unmarried daughter with a baby. I know I've told you he's a good man deep down, but I was wrong. Only go to him if you have nowhere else. The map will get you there." Dino stared at the words, shaking his head. No, that's not what happened." He crossed the room to his desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. From it, he withdrew a leather-bound journal. "I've kept this for 20 years. His mind transported him back to that terrible night. Lena, barely 19, standing in this very room, tears streaming down her face. "I'm pregnant, Dad." Dino remembered the shock, the disappointment washing over him. "Who's the father?" "It doesn't matter. He's gone." "Doesn't matter? Lena, how could you be so irresponsible? This will ruin everything, your education, your future." His voice had risen with each word. "My future is my choice," she'd shouted back. "Not while you live under my roof." The words had barely left his mouth when Lena turned and ran. He'd called after her, but pride kept him from following immediately. By the time he went to her room, she was gone. A note on her bed simply read, "You've made your choice. I've made mine." "I never told her to leave," Dino said quietly, coming back to the present. "I was angry, yes, disappointed, but I never threw her out." He looked at Loretta, realization dawning. She misunderstood, or I wasn't clear. "But this," he gestured to the letter, "this isn't what happened." By the time Dino arrived back from the city, the sun was setting behind heavy clouds. His mind was still reeling from what he'd discovered at the homeless shelter. The staff had recognized Lena's photo immediately. They'd called her the kind lady with the baby. They'd shown him the charred remains of the room where she'd lived with Noah and Loretta. The fire marshal's report confirmed what Loretta had said. Lena had died of smoke inhalation after rescuing the children. As he pulled up to the mansion, Dino spotted Loretta sitting on a bench in the garden, rocking Noah frantically. Even from a distance, he could tell something was wrong. He rushed across the lawn. "What happened?" He can't breathe right," Loretta stammered, her face pale with fear. "He started making these whistling sounds." Noah's tiny chest heaved with each labored breath. His lips had a bluish tint. "Why aren't you inside? Janet could have helped," Dino began. "I was scared," Loretta whispered. "Your housekeeper kept asking questions about where we came from. I thought you might have told her to—" Dino didn't wait to hear the rest. He scooped Noah from her arms. "My car. Now." The drive to the pediatric emergency room was a blur. Dino broke every speed limit, while Loretta sat in the back, singing softly to Noah despite her trembling voice. "His oxygen levels are dangerously low," the ER doctor said after they rushed Noah inside. "Severe malnutrition has compromised his immune system. He's fighting pneumonia." Dino paced the waiting room while the medical team worked. Loretta sat hunched in a chair, looking smaller than ever. "Why didn't you tell me he was this sick?" Dino finally asked. Tears spilled down Loretta's cheeks. "I've been trying so hard. I gave him most of my food, but it wasn't enough. After Mama Lena died, the little money we had ran out fast." She wiped her face with her sleeve. "I was afraid if you knew how bad it was, you'd think I wasn't taking care of him right." The truth hit Dino like a physical blow. This child had been starving herself to keep his grandson alive. Dr. Hart emerged from the treatment room. "We've stabilized him. He'll need to stay for observation, but he should recover fully." When the doctor left, Dino walked to the hallway and pressed his forehead against the cold wall. His shoulders began to shake. 20 years of carefully maintained control crumbled as he wept openly for the first time since Lena had left. He understood now. The letter wasn't just Lena's message. It was her fear speaking. The fear that had grown from his silence, his failure to find her, his inability to say the words that might have brought her home. When he finally composed himself, Dino made a call to his lawyer. "I need you to arrange a DNA test," he said, his voice hoarse, "for my grandson." But as he ended the call and looked through the window at Noah's tiny form connected to monitors and tubes, he knew in his heart what the test would confirm. Those were Lena's eyes looking back at him. This was his blood, his family, his second chance. In the meantime, while Noah recovered in the hospital, Dino found himself watching Loretta with growing curiosity. The girl moved through the world with a quiet determination that reminded him painfully of Lena. On the third day, the doctors allowed Noah to come home. Dino had transformed one of the guest rooms into a nursery, complete with a crib, changing table, and more stuffed animals than any one baby could possibly need. Loretta stood in the doorway, her eyes wide. "You didn't have to do all this." "He needs proper things," Dino said stiffly, uncomfortable with her gratitude. That evening, Dino paused outside the nursery door when he heard Loretta's soft voice. She was reading a story to Noah, who lay bundled in his new crib. What stopped Dino cold was the sight of Lena's old teddy bear cradled in Loretta's lap, its worn fur catching the lamplight. "And the little bear found his way home," Loretta read, gently stroking Noah's cheek. "Even though he was scared, he was brave. Just like you, little one." Dino backed away silently, his chest tight. The tenderness in Loretta's voice was something he'd never given Lena. His own father had raised him with stern discipline, not bedtime stories. He'd passed that coldness on to his daughter, never knowing another way. The next day, while Loretta napped, Dino climbed the stairs to his bedroom closet. In the far corner, behind rows of tailored suits, sat a dusty cardboard box he hadn't opened in 20 years. He carried it downstairs and placed it on the kitchen table. Inside were the precious few items he'd kept of Lena's childhood: a hospital ID bracelet from the day she was born, a handful of school photos showing her transformation from gap-toothed child to serious teenager, a report card with straight A's that he'd never properly celebrated, and beneath it all, a small silver charm bracelet with only 3 charms: a teddy bear, a book, and a tiny heart. When Loretta came downstairs, she found Dino sitting motionless at the table, the bracelet dangling from his fingers. "What's that?" she asked softly. "It was Lena's," he said, his voice rough. "She wore it until she was 12, then decided it was too childish." Hesitantly, he held it out to her. "I think she would want you to have it." Loretta's hands trembled as she took the bracelet. Her eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks. "Mama Lena used to tell me about this," she whispered. "She said her father gave it to her for her 8th birthday and that each charm meant something special." Dino swallowed hard. "The bear was for protection, the book for wisdom, and the heart." His voice faltered. "For love," Loretta finished, clutching the bracelet to her chest. Something broke inside Dino then, a wall he'd built decades ago. He didn't know if he deserved a second chance, didn't know if he could ever make up for failing Lena. But for the first time in 20 years, he wanted to try. Out of nowhere, the mansion's doorbell rang, its deep chime echoing through the halls. Dino frowned. He never received unannounced visitors. Janet, the housekeeper, appeared in the doorway of the living room where Dino sat watching Larita play with Noah on a blanket. "Mr. Graves," Janet said, her voice tight with concern. "There's a woman from Child Protective Services at the door. She's asking to speak with you immediately." Dino's stomach dropped. He glanced at Larita, whose face had gone pale. "Show her in," he said, standing up and straightening his shirt. A woman in her mid-40s entered the room dressed in a practical navy suit with a badge clipped to her belt. Her eyes swept the room, taking in every detail. "Mr. Graves, I'm Agent Carla Mendoza from Child Protective Services." She extended her hand. "We received an anonymous report from a neighbor that you're housing a minor and an infant without proper guardianship documentation." Dino shook her hand, his face carefully composed. "I assure you there's been a misunderstanding." Agent Mendoza's gaze shifted to Larita, who had gathered Noah into her arms and was backing toward the hallway. "And you must be Larita," Agent Mendoza said. "May I speak with you as well?" Just a moment," Larita stammered. "I need to put Noah down for his nap." Before anyone could respond, she hurried from the room. Instead of heading upstairs to the nursery, however, she ducked into the downstairs bathroom. With trembling hands, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small orange prescription bottle. She glanced at the label, then quickly tucked it behind the stack of fresh towels on the shelf. Taking a deep breath, she returned to the living room with Noah. Agent Mendoza sat across from Dino, a notepad open on her lap. "Mr. Graves, do you have any legal guardianship documents for either the child or the infant?" "Not yet," Dino replied stiffly, "but I'm working on obtaining them." The agent's eyebrows rose. "And in the meantime, you've taken it upon yourself to house 2 minors without legal authority?" "They're my family," Dino said, his voice hardening. "Can you prove that?" Agent Mendoza asked. "We have no record of you having any dependents or relatives in the system." Larita stood in the doorway, clutching Noah tightly. "Please don't take him," she whispered. Agent Mendoza turned to her with a gentler expression. "Larita, I need to ask you some questions. How old are you?" 14, Larita answered, her voice small. "And Noah?" 4 months. "Do you have any guardianship papers? Birth certificates? Anything that shows who's legally responsible for you both?" Larita pulled Noah closer and remained silent, her eyes filling with tears. Dino stood up. "Agent Mendoza, I understand your concerns. Noah is my grandson. His mother, my daughter, passed away recently. I'm in the process of confirming this with a DNA test and securing legal guardianship." The agent looked unconvinced. "Mr. Graves, your isolated lifestyle and lack of preparation concerns me. These children need stable, legally recognized care." "I'm providing that," Dino insisted, an edge of desperation in his voice. "Give me 48 hours. I'll have the DNA results and will file for emergency guardianship." Agent Mendoza studied him for a long moment, then closed her notepad. 48 hours, Mr. Graves. I'll return then. If you don't have proper documentation by that time, I'll be back with a court order to place these children in temporary state custody." She handed Dino her card. "Don't make me do that." Back then, Dino was a man obsessed with order and discipline. His world operated like clockwork, predictable, controlled, and without surprises. The memory came flooding back as he sat in his study, the DNA test results confirming what his heart already knew. Noah was indeed his grandson. 20 years earlier, 17-year-old Lena had sat across from him at the massive dining table, her hands trembling as she pushed her untouched food around her plate. "Dad," she had said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something." Dino remembered looking up from his newspaper, folding it precisely along its original creases. "What is it?" Lena's voice cracked. "I'm pregnant." The words had hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Dino felt his body go rigid, his face freezing into an unreadable mask. Inside, a storm of emotions. Shock, fear, disappointment, worry, battled for dominance. But outside he showed nothing, said nothing. His mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. her future, her education, what people would say, what he should do. But before he could find the right words, Lena had interpreted his silence. Tears streamed down her face. "I knew it," she had cried, pushing back from the table. "You're ashamed of me." "Lena, wait." Dino had finally managed, but it was too late. "I don't need your judgment," she had shouted, running from the room. By morning, she was gone. In the present, Dino sat at his desk, the memory so vivid it felt like an open wound. Janet entered with a tray of coffee, noticing his troubled expression. "The DNA results came," he said, his voice hollow. "Noah is Lena's son, my grandson." Janet set the tray down gently. "I never doubted it. He has her eyes." Dino looked up at his housekeeper, the woman who had been in his home for 30 years, who had watched Lena grow up. "Janet, I never told her to leave. That night she told me she was pregnant. I didn't know what to say. I froze." Janet's face softened with a sadness that matched his own. "Your silence spoke louder than you ever could, Mr. Graves." The truth of those words hit Dino like a physical blow, his inability to express emotion, to show love when it mattered most. It had cost him his daughter. "I won't make the same mistake again," he said firmly, reaching for the phone. "I'm calling Thomas Weston." "Your attorney?" Janet asked. "Yes. I'm filing for emergency guardianship of Noah." Dino paused, then added, "And Loretta too. They both need a home. They both need family." Janet's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded with approval. After making the call, Dino pulled out a sheet of his personal stationery. He began writing words he should have said 20 years ago. "Dear Lena, I failed you that night. My silence wasn't rejection, it was fear. Fear that I wouldn't be the father you needed. I was wrong to let you go. Wrong to not search harder. Wrong to not tell you every day that I loved you no matter what." His hand trembled as he wrote, tears blurring his vision. This letter would never reach his daughter, but perhaps in caring for her son and the brave girl who had brought him home, Dino could finally speak the words his silence had buried for too long. After a while, Dino noticed subtle changes creeping into his once rigid routine. The mansion that had echoed with silence for decades, now filled with the soft babble of an infant and the gentle voice of a young girl. Breakfast, once a solitary affair of coffee and the financial news, transformed into something entirely different. "Would you like some more toast?" Dino asked one morning, awkwardly holding out the plate to Loretta. She smiled shyly, taking a piece. "Thank you." The first few breakfasts had been stiff with long stretches of uncomfortable silence broken only by Noah's occasional coos. But day by day, the silence gave way to conversation. Dino found himself lingering at the table rather than rushing to his study. "Did my mom like pancakes?" Loretta asked one morning, bouncing Noah gently on her knee. Dino looked up, surprised. "Lena?" "Yes, she did, but only with blueberries. Never plain." A small smile tugged at his lips. "She used to arrange them into faces, said it made them taste better." Loretta giggled. "That sounds like Mama Lena." The name still pinched Dino's heart, but now it came with a bittersweet warmth rather than just pain. As the days passed, their meals grew longer. Dino found himself sharing stories he hadn't allowed himself to remember for years. "She used to dance," he said one evening over dinner. "Right down that hallway. She'd put on her mother's records and twirl until she got dizzy." "Did you ever dance with her?" Loretta asked, her eyes bright with interest. Dino looked down at his plate. "Number I was always too busy." "It's not too late to dance," Loretta said softly, glancing at Noah, who was falling asleep in his carrier. Later that week, Dino pulled out old photo albums. He and Loretta sat side by side on the living room sofa as he pointed to pictures of Lena. "Here she is collecting fireflies. She insisted we use jars with holes punched in the lids, said they needed to breathe just like we do." He turned the page. "And this is her first day of school." Loretta traced the image with her finger. "She looks like Noah around the eyes." "Yes," Dino agreed, his voice thick. "She does." But amid these warming days, Dino couldn't help noticing troubling signs. Loretta seemed to tire easily. Her cheeks, once rosy, grew pale. Sometimes, climbing the stairs with Noah, she would pause, breathing heavily. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked one afternoon when he found her leaning against the wall in the hallway. "I'm fine," she insisted, straightening up quickly. "Just tired. Noah was fussy last night." Dino nodded, but he didn't believe her. That evening, after Larita had gone to bed, he made a phone call to Dr. Hart. "I need you to examine someone," he said quietly into the phone. "A young girl, 14, maybe 15. She's showing signs of—" He paused, not wanting to name his fears. "Just a complete checkup, as soon as possible." "Of course, Mr. Graves," the doctor replied. "Bring her in tomorrow morning." "She doesn't know yet," Dino admitted. "I'll have to find a way to tell her." As he hung up, Dino glanced toward the staircase leading to where Larita and Noah slept. For the first time in decades, his home felt like a home again, and he was terrified of losing it. At dusk, Dino walked alone through the garden paths of his estate, the fading light casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. In his hands, he held Lena's letter, the one Larita had carried with her on her journey. He'd read it dozens of times since their arrival, but tonight something different caught his eye. "If you find this, I beg you to take care of them like I couldn't." The words seemed to leap off the page. Lena had entrusted these two lives to him, a man who had failed her so completely. The weight of that trust pressed against his chest. As the sky deepened to purple, Dino's phone rang. It was Dr. Hart. "Mr. Graves, the DNA results have arrived." Dino's breath caught. "And the test confirms with 99.9% certainty that you are the biological grandfather of Noah." Though he had known it in his heart, hearing the scientific confirmation made Dino's knees weak. He lowered himself onto a stone bench, his hand trembling as it held the phone. "Thank you, doctor," he managed to say before ending the call. When the formal results arrived by courier an hour later, Dino held the papers with shaking hands. The clinical language, genetic markers, paternal lineage, probability factors, all pointed to one undeniable truth. Noah was Lena's son, his grandson. The reality stung and soothed him all at once. Stung because it confirmed how much time he had lost with Lena. Soothed because it meant he had not lost everything. "A second chance," he whispered to the darkening garden. A chance to be the father, the grandfather, he had failed to be before. From inside the house came a sudden cry. Dino hurried inside to find Larita on the floor of the living room, Noah wailing in his carrier nearby. "I'm fine," she insisted, quickly pushing herself up. "I just got dizzy for a second." But Dino had seen the way she'd clutched at her chest, the blue tinge to her lips that hadn't been there before. "You're not fine," he said firmly, helping her to the couch, "and this isn't the first time I've noticed you struggling to breathe." Larita's eyes filled with tears. "Please, I'm okay." "Larita." Dino's voice was gentle but firm. "No more secrets. What's wrong?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with a shuddering breath, she whispered, "I have a heart condition. I've had it since I was little." "Why didn't you tell me?" Dino asked, sitting beside her. "Please don't tell them," she begged, gripping his hand with surprising strength. "If CPS finds out, they'll separate us. They'll take Noah away." Her voice broke. "If they take him, I won't survive. He's all I have left of Mama Lena." Dino looked at the young girl before him. So brave, so determined, and so fragile. Then he glanced at the DNA results still in his hand. His family. Both of them. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steadier than it had been in years. "No one is taking either of you away. I promise you that. We'll get you the medical care you need, and we'll keep you together." "But how?" Larita whispered. Dino squeezed her hand. "Because I'm going to protect you both. At all costs. That's what family does." Soon after receiving the DNA results, Dino threw himself into preparing for the custody hearing. His mansion, once a fortress of solitude, now buzzed with activity. He converted his home office into a war room, with calendars, legal documents, and to-do lists covering every surface. "We need the best," he told housekeeper Janet. "Someone who understands what these children need." After thorough research, Dino hired attorney Claire Santiago, a formidable advocate known for her work with vulnerable children. She arrived at the mansion wearing a crisp navy suit, her expression serious as she reviewed the case files. "Mr. Graves," she said, her dark eyes studying him across his desk, "your wealth and resources are helpful, but they're not enough. The court will want to see that you understand what these children need emotionally." Dino shifted uncomfortably. "I can provide everything they could want." Claire shook her head firmly. "Redemption isn't enough. You have to prove you're capable now. CPS will look at your isolated lifestyle, your lack of parenting experience, and the fact that until recently, you didn't even know these children existed." Her words stung, but Dino recognized their truth. "Tell me what to do." Under Claire's guidance, Dino enrolled in parenting classes at the community center. Twice a week, he sat among young couples and single parents, learning about child development and emotional needs. At first, he felt awkward and out of place, but gradually he began participating, even sharing stories about Noah's first smile. "It's like he knew who I was," Dino told the group, his voice soft with wonder. Additionally, he began volunteering at a children's rehabilitation center, reading stories to kids recovering from surgeries and injuries. The hospital staff were surprised to see the famously reclusive businessman sitting cross-legged on the floor, a picture book in his hands. At home, Dino installed baby gates and cabinet locks. He learned to prepare Noah's formula and rock him to sleep. He found himself humming Lena's lullaby, the one Larita had sung that first night at the gates. But as Dino grew more confident, Larita grew weaker. She began fainting more frequently, once while holding Noah, which terrified them all. Dr. Hart insisted on running tests, confirming what they feared. Her heart condition was deteriorating. "We need to document this," Claire advised during their weekly strategy meeting. "Her medical condition strengthens our case for emergency guardianship of both children." Dino watched through the window as Larita sat in the garden, Noah nestled in her lap. Despite her pallor, she smiled as she pointed out butterflies to the baby. "I'm not just fighting for Noah anymore," Dino told Claire. "I need to protect Larita too. Legally, medically, everything." Claire nodded, making notes in her file. "We'll need to amend our petition to include medical guardianship. That will allow you to make healthcare decisions for her." "Whatever it takes," Dino said, his voice firm with resolve. "They're my family now." Years earlier, Lena Graves sat across from her best friend Miriam in a small diner with cracked vinyl booths and the smell of coffee hanging in the air. Lena's hands rested protectively over her barely showing pregnancy bump, her eyes bright with hope despite the dark circles beneath them. "I'm going to raise this baby in peace," Lena said, stirring her tea absently. "Far away from my father's shadow. No cold silences, no disappointment in the air like it's part of the furniture." Miriam reached across the table, squeezing Lena's hand. "Your father loves you, Lena. He just doesn't know how to show it." "Love without words or warmth isn't love at all," Lena whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. "My baby deserves better." Miriam's eyes softened with compassion. "One day he'll regret everything. And maybe that day, you'll forgive him." Lena looked out the window, watching rain streak the glass. "Maybe. But I can't wait around for that day to come." In the present, Dino sat in his car outside a modest brick building that housed the city's social services department. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. After several deep breaths, he finally stepped out into the chilly afternoon air. The reception area was crowded with families and caseworkers. Dino felt out of place in his expensive suit, among the worn furniture and faded posters about community resources. "Mr. Graves?" A woman with graying hair pulled into a bun approached him. "I'm Miriam Cortez." Recognition flashed in Dino's eyes. "You're in the photos with Lena." Miriam nodded, leading him to a small office. "I was her best friend. I became a social worker because of her, actually." Inside the cramped space, Miriam confirmed what Dino had been piecing together. Lena lived at the East Side Women's Shelter for almost a year. She gave birth to Noah there. We all helped raise him. Her voice cracked. The night of the fire, she got 3 women and their children out before going back in for a toddler who was trapped. The ceiling collapsed. Dino's face remained still, but his eyes betrayed his anguish. "She never spoke ill of you," Miriam said softly. "She was angry, yes, but there was always love there too." Miriam opened her desk drawer and pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age and creased from handling. "She wrote this about a month before she died. She never mailed it." Dino took the envelope with trembling fingers. His daughter's handwriting stared back at him, looping letters spelling out his name. "Thank you," he managed to say. Back in his car, Dino stared at the envelope for long minutes before carefully opening it. The paper inside was filled with Lena's handwriting, some words crossed out, others underlined multiple times. "Dad," it began, "I've written this letter 100 times in my head. I don't know if I'll ever send it. Part of me is still that scared teenager who ran away. But now I have Noah, and he's made me braver." Tears blurred Dino's vision as he read about his grandson's first smile, first word, about Lena's struggles and triumphs as a single mother, about her forgiveness. The letter ended. "If you ever find Noah, love him like you would have loved me. He deserves a grandfather. And maybe, through him, you'll find the father I always needed you to be." Dino pressed the letter to his chest, his body shaking with silent sobs as 20 years of regret crashed over him like a wave. At that moment, as Dino Graves finished reading Lena's second letter, a realization hit him like a tidal wave. His hands trembled, the paper quivering between his fingers. Tears streamed down his weathered face, but for the first time in decades, they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of understanding. He hadn't truly lost Lena. Her love lived on through Noah's bright eyes and Larita's gentle determination. All this time, he'd been drowning in silence, letting it become his legacy, just as his own father had done. But now, sitting in his car outside the social services building, Dino made a decision. "No more," he whispered, carefully folding the letter and placing it in his breast pocket, right over his heart. That evening, Dino entered his study, a room he'd once used only for business and isolation. He pulled a dusty wooden box from the highest shelf. It was his late wife's memory box, untouched since her passing 15 years ago. The hinges creaked as he opened it, releasing the faint scent of lavender. Inside lay photographs of Lena as a baby, her toothless smile beaming up at him. There was the tiny hospital bracelet from the day she was born, a lock of dark hair tied with a faded ribbon, and report cards he'd once glanced at without comment. Dino's fingers brushed over each item with newfound reverence. He pulled out a blank sheet of paper, and for the first time in years, began to write from his heart. "My dearest Lena," he wrote, his pen pressing firmly against the paper. "For 20 years I've lived in the prison of my own making. My silence when you needed my voice. My stillness when you needed my embrace." He continued writing, pouring out 2 decades of unsaid words. When he finished, he read the letter aloud to the empty room, his voice growing stronger with each sentence. "This time I will speak. I will protect them. I will be the father you needed, the grandfather Noah deserves, and the guardian Larita can trust. I cannot change our past, but I swear on everything I hold dear, I will honor your legacy by loving them as I should have loved you." The phone rang just as Dino sealed the envelope. It was Claire Santiago. "Mr. Graves," her voice was tense, "I have news and it's not good. Child Services is pushing for temporary foster placement for both Larita and Noah. They've accelerated the timeline. The hearing is set for 5 days from now." Dino's jaw tightened. Why so soon? "They've received medical reports about Larita's condition. They're claiming it's an emergency situation, that she can't properly care for Noah while her health is deteriorating, and you have no legal standing yet." Dino looked at the letter he'd just written, at Lena's baby photos spread across his desk. Something fierce and protective rose within him, something that had been dormant for far too long. "They will not take those children," he said, his voice low and determined. "Not now. Not ever. Mr. Graves, the odds. I don't care about odds, Ms. Santiago. I care about my family. Tell me what we need to do and we'll do it. I will not fail them again. I apologize for the confusion. I'll follow your instructions to write in third-person perspective and cover the events outlined in your prompt. During the summer of 1965, 10-year-old Dino Graves stood at rigid attention in the front yard of their military housing unit. The sun beat down mercilessly on his crew-cut hair, sweat trickling down his back as he maintained perfect posture. 5 minutes had passed since his father, Colonel Raymond Graves, had ordered him to stand there, punishment for crying when he'd fallen off his bicycle. Graves' men don't show weakness, Colonel Raymond said, pacing in front of his son. His polished shoes clicked against the concrete walkway. Emotions are a luxury we cannot afford. Young Dino blinked rapidly, fighting back tears that threatened to spill again. His skinned knee stung beneath his trousers, but he dared not move to inspect it. "Do you understand why you're standing here, son?" Colonel Raymond asked, his voice eerily calm. "Yes, sir," Dino replied, his voice small but steady. "I showed weakness." "And what does weakness invite?" "Failure, sir." Colonel Raymond nodded, satisfied. "When you feel something, anything, you swallow it down, you lock it away. That's how you become a man worthy of respect." That evening at dinner, Dino's mother tried to intercede, her soft voice a stark contrast to the colonel's commanding tone. "Raymond, he's just a boy. Boys fall and cry. It's natural." The colonel's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Natural doesn't mean acceptable, Margaret. The world doesn't reward natural. It rewards strength and discipline." Young Dino watched this exchange silently, learning another lesson. Voices raised in emotion were ineffective. Real power came from controlled silence. For his 11th birthday, instead of a party, Colonel Raymond gave Dino a leather-bound journal. "Write down your feelings here," he instructed, "then burn the pages. Get it out of your system where no one can see, then move forward unburdened." Dino had followed this advice for decades, filling and burning countless journals, never learning how to actually process his emotions, only how to hide them. In the present day, Dino sat across from Larita in the mansion's library. Noah slept peacefully in a bassinet nearby. The room, once Dino's sanctuary of isolation, now felt different with their presence, warmer somehow. "Why did you never try to fix things with Lena?" Larita asked, her eyes gentle but direct. She'd been sorting through old photo albums Dino had finally brought out from storage. Dino's hand stilled on the leather cover of an album. The question hung in the air between them. In the past, he would have deflected or retreated into silence. But now, with the custody hearing looming and Larita's trusting gaze upon him, he found himself wanting to answer. "I didn't know how to love without hurting," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "My father taught me that feelings were weakness, that silence was strength." He gestured to the photos of a teenage Lena, her smile guarded in every image. "When she told me she was pregnant, I froze. I had no tools to respond with love or support. I just stood there, like I'd been trained to do my whole life." Larita reached across the table and placed her hand on his, a gesture so simple yet so foreign to Dino that he nearly pulled away. "Your father was wrong," she said quietly. "Silence isn't strength. It's just silence." Dino looked at her thin hand resting on his larger one. "I know that now, but knowing and doing are different battles." "Mama Lena used to say that healing starts with planting something new," Larita said, a faint smile crossing her face. "She always grew flowers, even in the shelter. Just little pots on the windowsill." The next morning dawned clear and cool. Dino stood in the mansion's sprawling but neglected garden, watching as Larita carefully examined the soil near a sun-drenched wall. Noah was secured in a carrier on Dino's chest, a sight that would have been unimaginable just weeks ago. "This spot gets good light," Larita said, brushing dirt from her hands. "Perfect for the flowers Mama Lena loved." Together they worked through the morning. Dino dug holes in the rich earth, while Larita planted seedlings, marigolds, zinnias, and sunflowers. Noah watched from his blanket on the grass, occasionally cooing at butterflies that fluttered past. As they worked, Dino found himself sharing more stories from his childhood, the strict schedules, the military precision expected in all things, the journals burned to ash. "That's so sad," Larita said, patting soil around a delicate seedling. "Everyone needs someone to talk to." "I'm learning that now," Dino replied, surprising himself with the admission. When they finished, they stood back to admire their work. The flower bed wasn't large, but it was carefully arranged, with stones marking its border and a small wooden sign Dino had crafted that morning. "We should call it something," Larita suggested, wiping sweat from her brow. Her face was paler than it should have been from the light exertion, but her eyes shone with accomplishment. "What about Lena's garden?" For the first time since Larita and Noah had arrived, Dino smiled, not a polite curve of lips, but a genuine expression that reached his eyes and softened the hard lines of his face. "Lena's garden," he repeated, the name feeling right on his tongue. She would have liked that. As they gathered their gardening tools, the bond between them had deepened in ways neither could articulate. In planting Lena's garden, they had begun to plant something else too: trust, understanding, and perhaps the beginnings of healing. Later that day, Claire Santiago spread her documents across Dino's mahogany desk. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the stark contrast between her organized legal papers and the scattered family photos Dino had recently begun displaying. "The judge will be looking for emotional stability as much as financial security," Claire explained, her tone professional but kind. "You need to be prepared for difficult questions." Dino nodded, his posture stiff but determined. "I understand." "Let's role-play," Claire suggested, straightening her blazer. "I'll be Judge Michaels. You be yourself." For the next hour, Claire fired questions at Dino. He answered steadily about his resources, his plans for Noah's education, and his commitment to Larita's medical care. But when Claire leaned forward with narrowed eyes, her voice took on a sharper edge. "Mr. Graves, why should a man who failed his daughter be trusted with her son?" The question hung in the air. Dino's mouth opened, then closed. His hands, resting on the armrests of his chair, tightened until his knuckles turned white. He began, then stopped. The carefully constructed answers he'd prepared crumbled away. Claire waited, her expression softening as she watched Dino struggle. "I don't know," he finally admitted, his voice barely audible. "I don't know if I should be trusted, but I know I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of it." Claire set down her notepad. "That's actually not bad," she said gently. "Authenticity matters in family court, but we need more." She pulled out a small camera from her briefcase. "I want to record a video testimony, something that shows the judge who you are now, not just who you were." As Claire set up the camera, Dino stood by the window, gathering his thoughts. Down below, he could see Larita sitting in Lena's garden, reading a book to Noah. Unbeknownst to them, Larita had finished her story and was making her way back inside. As she approached Dino's study, she paused at the sound of Claire's voice. "The foster system is overwhelmed right now," Claire was saying. "If the judge denies your petition for guardianship, Larita and Noah would likely be placed separately. Teenagers and infants have different placement needs." Larita's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. The thought of being separated from Noah sent a wave of panic through her body. She hurried away before they could discover her eavesdropping, clutching Noah tighter against her chest. That night after dinner, Dino was passing by Larita's room when he heard muffled sobs. He hesitated, then knocked softly. "Larita?" When there was no answer, he gently pushed the door open. Larita sat on the edge of her bed, tears streaming down her face. Noah slept peacefully in his crib nearby. "I heard Ms. Santiago today," she confessed, wiping her eyes. "They're going to take Noah away from me, aren't they?" Dino crossed the room and after a moment's hesitation sat beside her on the bed. "No," he said firmly, "they're not. But what if the judge—" "Listen to me," Dino interrupted, his voice low and intense. "No one's going to break this family again. Not the courts, not anyone. He reached out awkwardly, then placed his hand on Larita's shoulder. I failed Lena. I won't fail you or Noah. Whatever it takes, we stay together. Larita looked up at him, hope flickering in her tear-filled eyes. Promise? I promise, Dino said, and for the first time in decades, he felt the full weight and worth of his word. As time went on, Dino threw himself into preparation with the intensity that had once made him a business success. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, he attended parenting workshops at the community center, sitting awkwardly among younger couples but taking meticulous notes. On Wednesdays, he volunteered at the Sunshine Children's Support Center, where he read stories to kids who reminded him of what Lena must have been like at their age. Mr. Graves, would you share your thoughts on emotional availability? Asked the workshop facilitator one evening. Dino hesitated, then spoke from a place he'd only recently discovered within himself. I spent decades believing silence was strength. I was wrong. It cost me my daughter. But now I understand that speaking your feelings isn't weakness, it's the bravest thing you can do. His simple, heartfelt words resonated with the group. A local reporter in attendance approached him afterward, asking if he would consider speaking at an upcoming family wellness conference. To his own surprise, Dino agreed. The small speech he gave about his journey from emotional isolation to connection struck a chord. The following day, his photo appeared in the local paper under the headline, "Tech Mogul's Second Chance, a Story of Transformation." At home, Dino taped the article to the refrigerator, not out of pride, but as a reminder of his promise. One crisp morning, as Dino helped Noah with his breakfast while Larita sipped her tea, the doorbell rang. Janet opened the door to reveal Agent Carla Mendoza, clipboard in hand. "Unannounced welfare check," she explained, her expression professional but softer than during her first visit. Dino welcomed her in. "We were just having breakfast. Would you like to join us?" Carla observed the scene before her. Dino gently wiping yogurt from Noah's chin, Larita laughing as she told a story about a squirrel she'd seen in the garden. The formal dining room now had a high chair, children's drawings on the wall, and a warmth that hadn't existed before. "I'll just observe, thank you," she said, making notes as she walked through the house. Later, as Larita took Noah upstairs for his nap, Carla pulled Dino aside. "There's significant improvement here, Mr. Graves," she admitted. "But I should inform you that the court will require testimony from Larita herself. Given her age, they'll want to hear her perspective directly." Dino's stomach knotted with fear. "She's just a child, and her health—" "I understand your concerns," Carla said, "but the judge needs to hear from her." After Carla left, Dino immediately called Claire. "She can't testify," he insisted, pacing his study. "The stress could trigger her heart condition. And what if they ask her difficult questions about Lena, about the shelter?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "There might be a workaround. What if Larita writes a letter expressing her feelings? Someone she trusts could read it aloud in court. It's not standard procedure, but given her medical condition, we could petition for this accommodation." Dino stopped pacing. "A letter?" "Yes. In her own words. Honest. From the heart. The judge would still hear her voice. Just not literally." That evening, Dino sat with Larita in the garden they'd planted together. "Would you be willing to write down how you feel?" he asked gently. "About being here, about Noah, about—" He hesitated. "About me?" Larita looked up at him, her eyes wise beyond her years. "I could do that. I've been writing to Mama Lena in my journal anyway." Dino nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you. Your words matter, Larita. They always have." At sunrise, golden light spilled through the windows of the mansion's sunroom, casting a warm glow over Larita and Dino. They sat side by side at a small table covered with colored pencils, markers, and several sheets of paper. Larita's tongue poked out slightly from the corner of her mouth as she concentrated on the letter before her. "Dear Judge," she wrote in careful, rounded letters, "my name is Larita. I am 11 years old. I came here with baby Noah because Mama Lena told me to find his grandpa. Dino watched silently, his heart swelling as Larita's small hand moved across the page. He'd offered to help her draft it, but Claire had advised against it. "The judge needs to hear her authentic voice," she'd said. Dino understood now. Larita's simple words carried more power than anything he could have crafted. Larita paused to pick up a green marker, beginning a careful drawing at the bottom of the page. "What are you adding?" Dino asked softly. "Pictures," she replied. "Sometimes it's hard to say everything with just words." Her drawings took shape: a large house with a red roof, a tiny baby with a smile, a woman with flowing hair labeled Mama Lena, and finally a large red heart with Dino written inside it. Larita added a final sentence at the bottom. "He's not scary anymore, he's my home." When she finished, she pushed the paper toward Dino. "Is it okay?" Dino had to look away, blinking rapidly. "It's perfect," he managed to say. Across town, Claire Santiago sat in Dr. Emilio Hart's office, reviewing Larita's medical files. "Her condition is progressing faster than we'd hoped," Dr. Hart explained, pointing to the latest test results. "The arrhythmia is becoming more frequent, and there's increased strain on her heart. She needs a consistent care plan with regular monitoring and possible surgical intervention within the year." Claire nodded, making notes. "And without proper care?" Dr. Hart's expression grew grave. "Without it, her prognosis is poor. She needs stability, proper medication, and a guardian who can make informed medical decisions." "Thank you, doctor," Claire said, gathering the documents. "This will be crucial for the hearing." Later that afternoon, Claire arrived at the mansion to find Dino in his study, surrounded by medical journals and heart condition research. "I've been reading everything I can find," he said without looking up. "If the court denies full guardianship, I'm filing for medical custody of Larita separately, regardless of what happens with Noah's case." Claire set her briefcase down. "That's a significant commitment, Dino. It would mean years of medical appointments, possible surgeries, medications." "I know exactly what it means," Dino interrupted, finally meeting her gaze. His eyes were tired but resolute. "She's family now. I won't abandon her, no matter what the court decides about Noah." Claire studied him for a long moment, then nodded with newfound respect. "That's what a real father does," she said quietly. All of a sudden, Dino's phone rang as he was reviewing court documents with Claire. The shrill sound made his heart jump. It was Janet, her voice tight with worry. "Mr. Graves, it's Noah. He's burning up with fever. Larita tried to cool him down, but he's not responding." Dino dropped the papers, already moving toward the door. "I'm coming right now." He found Noah flushed and whimpering in his crib, his tiny body radiating heat. Larita stood nearby, her face pale with fear. "I just checked on him and he was like this," she whispered, her voice breaking. Without hesitation, Dino scooped Noah into his arms, wrapping him in a light blanket. "Call Dr. Hart," he instructed Claire. "Tell him we're heading to Children's Memorial." The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and silent prayers. Dino kept glancing in the rearview mirror at Noah, who had grown quieter, a fact that terrified him more than the crying. "Stay with me, little one," Dino murmured. "Please stay with me." At the hospital, nurses whisked Noah away immediately. Dino paced the waiting room, his hands shaking. Every minute felt like an hour. The fear clawing at his chest was familiar, the same paralyzing dread he'd felt the day Lena walked out his door. "Mr. Graves?" A doctor finally approached. "Noah has a bacterial infection. His immune system is compromised from the earlier malnutrition, making him more susceptible. We've started antibiotics, and he's responding well." Dino sagged against the wall. "He'll be okay?" "With proper care, yes. We'd like to keep him overnight for observation." After seeing Noah now sleeping peacefully with an IV in his tiny arm, Dino returned to the waiting room. The weight of what had almost happened crashed over him. He buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Coffee?" A gentle voice interrupted his breakdown. Dino looked up to see a nurse holding out a paper cup. Something about her seemed familiar. "Thank you," he said, accepting it with unsteady hands. The nurse studied him. "You're Dino Graves, aren't you? Noah's grandfather?" Dino nodded, surprised. "I thought I recognized him," she continued. "I worked at Harmony House Shelter before transferring here. I knew Lena." Dino froze. "You knew my daughter?" The nurse nodded, sitting beside him. "She was extraordinary, always helping others, even with a newborn. The night of the fire," her voice softened. "Lena got 3 children out before going back in for more. The smoke was too thick by then." "She went back in?" Dino whispered. "She refused to leave anyone behind. She saved those children, Mr. Graves. She died a hero." Tears filled Dino's eyes again, but different ones now. All these years, he'd pictured Lena broken, bitter, alone, but she hadn't died that way at all. She'd died brave, selfless, everything he should have been for her. "Thank you," he managed to say. "Thank you for telling me." After the nurse left, Dino stood at the window overlooking the city lights. His reflection stared back at him, and for the first time, he didn't look away from what he saw. "I understand now, Lena," he whispered. "And I promise you, I'll protect them with everything I have. I'll be as brave as you were." In that sterile hospital waiting room, surrounded by worry and antiseptic, Dino Graves made a silent vow to become the protector his family needed, the father he should have been all along. In those days, the Harmony House Shelter was overcrowded but warm with humanity. Nurse Marina sat across from Dino in the hospital cafeteria, her coffee untouched as she shared memories of Lena. "Your daughter arrived with just a diaper bag and Noah wrapped in a yellow blanket," Marina said, her eyes distant with remembrance. "She was so young, but I never once saw her cry for herself." Dino leaned forward, hungry for every detail about the daughter he'd lost. "What was she like there?" Marina smiled softly. "Lena became the heart of our little community. Even though she had the least experience as a mother, she somehow became everyone's rock." The nurse described how Lena would gather the shelter children each evening, reading from tattered books she'd found at yard sales. She'd make different voices for each character, bringing magic to their difficult lives. "One night our food delivery didn't come," Marina continued. "We had nothing but half a bag of rice and some canned beans. Lena somehow turned it into a feast. She called it adventure stew and had the children pretend they were explorers discovering a new recipe." Dino closed his eyes, picturing his daughter, so much stronger than he'd ever allowed her to be at home. "Noah was always on her hip or sleeping nearby," Marina said. "She'd whisper stories to him about his grandfather, stories about a man who built things, who was strong and brave." Dino's throat tightened. "She told him about me?" Marina nodded. "Every night. Even after everything, she wanted Noah to know where he came from." The nurse described the night before the fire, how Lena had sat at the shelter's small desk, writing by flashlight after everyone else was asleep. "I asked what she was writing," Marina said. "She told me it was a letter to Noah's grandfather, just in case. The next morning, I saw her tuck it into Noah's blanket, along with a small, hand-drawn map." Marina's voice grew softer. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "He'll find you. Just believe he will." It was like she somehow knew. Tears slid down Dino's cheeks unchecked. All these years, he'd imagined Lena's hatred, her bitterness. He'd never imagined her faith. "That night the fire alarm went off," Marina said. "Lena got Noah out first, handing him to me. Then she ran back in for the other children. She made 3 trips into that burning building. On the 4th, Marina's voice broke. Dino covered her hand with his. No words were needed. As they walked back toward Noah's room, they found Larita sitting in the hallway. Her face showed she'd heard everything. "She believed in you," Larita said quietly as Dino sat beside her, "even when you didn't believe in yourself." Dino nodded, unable to speak. The armor he'd built around his heart for decades was finally crumbling away completely. In its place was something raw and painful, but also healing, the truth of who his daughter had really been and who he could still become. "I wish I could have told her I was sorry," he whispered. Loretta took his large hand in her small one. "I think she knew," she said. "That's why she made sure we'd find you." Eventually, Dino and Claire sat in his study, surrounded by stacks of legal documents. The afternoon light slanted through the windows as they put the final touches on the guardianship presentation. Every form was filled, every medical record organized, every character reference neatly compiled. "We have a solid case," Claire said, tapping the folders. "But I think you should open with a personal statement instead of the legal arguments." Dino frowned, adjusting his tie nervously. "I'm not good with emotional speeches." "That's exactly why you need to do it," Claire insisted. "The judge needs to see the man, not the businessman. Show her you've changed." Dino stared at the blank paper before him. "What if I say the wrong thing?" "There is no wrong thing if it's honest," Claire replied. "This isn't about being perfect. It's about showing you're human." With reluctance, Dino picked up his pen and began to write. His hand trembled slightly as words formed on the page. Words about failure, regret, and the desperate hope for redemption. Meanwhile, in the hospital consultation room, Dr. Hart spoke quietly to Claire. "Loretta's latest tests aren't encouraging," he said, sliding the chart across the desk. "Her heart is weakening faster than we anticipated. Without stability and proper long-term treatment, I'm concerned about her prognosis." Claire studied the medical report, her expression grave. "How urgent is this?" "Months, not years," Dr. Hart replied. "She needs consistent care, minimal stress, and a stable home environment. The uncertainty isn't helping her condition." When Claire returned to the mansion, she found Dino still working on his statement. Her face told him everything before she spoke. "This is more than custody," she said firmly. "It's survival. Loretta's condition is deteriorating." Dino's face paled. "Why didn't she tell me how serious it was?" "She's protecting Noah," Claire said. "And you. She doesn't want to be a burden." Dino pushed aside his carefully crafted legal arguments. "Then we change our approach. This isn't about what I deserve anymore." Across town, Agent Carla Mendoza sat at her desk reviewing her notes on the Graves case. What had started as a routine investigation had become something else entirely. She pulled Loretta's letter from the file, reading again the child's simple, heartfelt words. "He's not scary anymore. He's my home." Carla thought about her visits to the mansion, how it had transformed from a cold, silent place to one filled with Noah's giggles and Loretta's quiet presence. She'd watched Dino change from a rigid, intimidating figure to a man who now sat on the floor to play with his grandson. With sudden decision, Carla opened a new document on her computer and began typing. The supporting affidavit took shape under her fingers, professional, objective, but unmistakably in favor of Dino's petition. Back at the mansion, Claire watched Dino tear up his original statement and start again. "Lead with your heart," she urged, "not your logic. The court needs to see who you are now, not who you were." Dino nodded, writing with new purpose. "I'll tell them the truth, all of it." The next morning, the courthouse bustled with activity as Dino straightened his tie for the 5th time. His hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm expression he struggled to maintain. Noah was with Janet at home, but Loretta had insisted on coming despite her pallor. "Remember to breathe," Claire whispered as they entered the courtroom. Judge Ramos, a stern-faced woman with silver-streaked hair, surveyed the room from her bench. Her gaze lingered on Dino, then shifted to Loretta, who sat quietly in a chair near the front, her small frame nearly swallowed by an oversized sweater. "All rise," the bailiff called. The proceedings began with formal introductions. Claire Santiago stepped forward, her voice clear and confident as she outlined their case. "Your Honor, Mr. Graves isn't just a successful businessman seeking guardianship. He's a man who has transformed himself completely for these children." Claire gestured toward a portfolio of evidence. "In just weeks, he's completed parenting classes, volunteered at children's centers, and created a stable, loving home for both Noah and Loretta." The judge nodded, reviewing the documents before her. "These references are impressive, Ms. Santiago, but I'd like to hear directly from Mr. Graves." Dino felt his mouth go dry as he approached the stand. The oath was administered, and suddenly all eyes were on him. He glanced at Larita, who gave him a tiny, encouraging nod. "Mr. Graves," Judge Ramos said, "why should this court entrust you with these children?" Dino took a deep breath. The carefully rehearsed speech vanished from his mind. Instead, he spoke from somewhere deeper. "Your Honor, I failed my daughter once," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I stayed silent when I should have spoken. When Lena needed me most, I froze. I've lived with that mistake for 20 years. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I won't make that mistake again. Not with her son. Not with the girl she trusted more than anyone." A hush fell over the courtroom as Dino continued. "I can't change the past, but I can honor my daughter by loving what she loved most in this world. These children aren't just my redemption, they're my family." Judge Ramos studied him for a long moment. "Thank you, Mr. Graves. I understand there's a letter from the child, Larita." Claire nodded, producing a folded paper with careful handwriting. "Larita prepared this herself, Your Honor." As Claire began to read, Larita's simple words filled the courtroom. "Dear Judge, my name is Larita. I'm 12 years old. Mama Lena told me Mr. Dino might be scary, but he's not anymore. He reads to Noah every night. He planted flowers with me. He makes sure I take my medicine. He's learning to make pancakes even though he burned them 3 times. Soft laughter rippled through the courtroom. Even Judge Ramos smiled slightly. "When I was little, I never had a home that felt safe. Now I do. Mr. Dino is not perfect, but he tries really hard. He's not scary anymore. He's my home." Carla Mendoza, sitting in the gallery, nodded imperceptibly as tears welled in her eyes. Just as Claire finished reading, a small sound came from where Larita sat. Dino turned to see her face suddenly drain of color. Her eyes rolled back, and before anyone could reach her, she slid from her chair onto the floor. "Larita!" Dino cried, rushing to her side. The courtroom erupted in commotion as Judge Ramos called for order and demanded someone call an ambulance. Dino gathered Larita's limp form in his arms, his face a mask of terror. "Stay with me," he whispered, cradling her close. "Please, stay with me." Right then and there, the courtroom erupted into chaos. People rose from their seats, voices calling out in alarm as Larita lay motionless on the floor. Dino knelt beside her, his face twisted with fear. "We need a doctor!" Claire shouted, rushing forward as Judge Ramos banged her gavel. "Court is in recess. Someone call an ambulance immediately," the judge ordered, her authoritative voice cutting through the commotion. Medical personnel rushed in within minutes, their practiced movements swift and efficient. As they assessed Larita, Dino refused to leave her side, his large hand gently holding her small one. "BP's dropping," one paramedic said to another as they prepared the stretcher. When they lifted Larita onto it, Dino moved with them, his eyes never leaving her pale face. "Hold on, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please hold on." The trip to the hospital was a blur. Dino sat in the ambulance, watching the paramedics work, his world narrowed to the shallow rise and fall of Larita's chest. At the hospital, doctors whisked her away, leaving Dino standing helplessly in the hallway, his hands still trembling. Hours later, Dr. Emilio Hart approached him with a grave expression. "Her heart condition has worsened significantly," he explained. "She needs surgery within weeks, or the damage will become irreversible." Dino sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "Will she recover from this episode?" "She's stabilizing, but this was a warning sign we can't ignore," Dr. Hart said. "She needs consistent care and a stress-free environment." Dino straightened, a new determination hardening his features. "I'll give her that. Whatever it takes." While Dino remained at Larita's bedside, Claire Santiago sprang into action. She gathered Carla Mendoza's surprise affidavit, a detailed account of Dino's transformation that ended with her professional recommendation for guardianship. "Judge Ramos needs to see this now," Claire told her assistant, adding it to a thick folder. "And these too." The folder contained statements from parenting instructors who marveled at Dino's dedication, shelter staff who recognized Noah, and community members who had witnessed Dino's involvement in children's programs. "I'm filing for emergency medical custody," Dino told Claire when she arrived at the hospital. I can't risk her being placed in foster care when she needs surgery." Claire nodded, already pulling out the necessary forms. "We'll submit it by morning. This changes everything, Dino. The judge will see that Larita's life literally depends on stability now." Outside the hospital, news of Larita's collapse spread quickly. The volunteers from the Children's Center where Dino had been helping organized a prayer circle. Several brought handmade cards for Larita. "Mr. Graves helped my son learn to read," one mother told a local reporter. "He's not the cold businessman everyone thinks. He's a man trying to make things right." As Dino sat beside Larita's hospital bed watching her sleep, he felt a strange calm settle over him. The fear remained, but alongside it was an unshakable resolve. This time, he wouldn't freeze. This time, he would fight with everything he had. At midnight, the hospital chapel stood silent and empty except for one man. Dino Graves sat in the last pew, his broad shoulders hunched forward, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The small electric candles flickered, casting shadows across his weary face. He hadn't prayed since his wife died. He barely remembered how. But tonight, words tumbled from his lips in desperate whispers. "I never asked you for anything before," Dino said, his voice cracking. "But if she wakes up, I'll never stop fighting for them." Tears slid down his cheeks, dropping onto his clenched hands. The weight of his failures, with Lena with himself, pressed down on him like a physical burden. But now there was something else too. A terrifying fear of losing Larita, of failing her just as he had failed her godmother. "Please," he whispered, "they deserve better than what life's given them." The chapel door opened with a soft creak. Claire Santiago stepped inside, her usually perfect appearance slightly rumpled after the long day. She spotted Dino and walked toward him, her heels clicking softly on the tile floor. "I've been looking everywhere for you," she said gently. Dino quickly wiped his face with his sleeve. "Any news?" Claire's tired face broke into a smile. "The judge called me personally. She's approved temporary emergency custody of both Larita and Noah." Dino stared at her, hardly daring to believe it. "Both of them?" "Both," Claire confirmed. "Judge Ramos cited the compelling evidence we presented, Carla's affidavit, and most importantly, Larita's medical condition. She agreed that separating them now would cause irreparable harm." Dino stood up so quickly he felt dizzy. "For how long?" 30 days, with strong indication for permanent approval after that. The full hearing is rescheduled for when Larita is well enough to attend." Claire touched his arm. "This is a major victory, Dino." Without thinking, Dino pulled Claire into a tight hug. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Claire said, smiling as she stepped back. "We still have work to do, but for tonight, go be with your family." Dino hurried through the quiet hospital corridors, his heart pounding. When he reached Larita's room, he paused at the doorway. She looked so small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines, her dark hair spread across the white pillow. He approached quietly and took her small hand in his. Her skin felt cool and fragile, like a bird's wing. He sat beside her, just watching her breathe. "We're going to be okay now," he whispered. To his surprise, Larita's eyelids fluttered. She opened them just slightly, her gaze unfocused at first, then finding his face. "Did we win?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Tears filled Dino's eyes again, but this time they came with relief, with joy. "Yes," he replied, letting them fall freely. "We're going home." A tiny smile curved Larita's lips before her eyes drifted closed again, her hand still held safely in his. Days turned into weeks as spring crept across the mansion grounds. The stark hallways that once echoed with emptiness now rang with the soft sounds of Noah's babbling and Larita's gentle laughter. The massive house, once cold and museum-like, transformed into something warmer, a home. Dino developed a rhythm to his days. Mornings began with Noah's bottle and breakfast with Larita, followed by parenting classes 3 times a week. Afternoons often found him at the hospital for Larita's pre-surgery appointments, Noah strapped to his chest in a carrier that had taken him nearly an hour to figure out the first time. "You're getting good at this," Nurse Marina commented one afternoon, watching Dino confidently change Noah's diaper in Larita's hospital room. "I have excellent teachers," Dino replied, glancing at Larita, who beamed from her bed. The east wing of the mansion, once filled with unused guest rooms, buzzed with activity as construction crews worked. Dino had hired a pediatric architect who specialized in creating healing spaces for children. "We'll have 6 recovery rooms," Dino explained to Claire during her weekly visit. "Medical equipment disguised in colorful cabinets, ceiling projectors for stargazing, and a playroom that connects to an accessible garden." Claire raised her eyebrows. "That's quite an investment." "It's not just for Larita," Dino said quietly. "After she recovers, we'll open it to other children who need a place to heal." Larita's surgery date approached, but rather than growing fearful, she seemed to gain strength. Each night, Dino would sit beside her bed, and she would ask him to read his letter to Lena, the one he had written but could never send. "Read the part about the garden again," she would say, her eyes bright despite her illness. One evening after reading, Larita reached for his hand. "She'd be proud of you," she whispered. "I am." Those simple words broke something open in Dino's heart. That night, after tucking Noah into his crib, Dino sat at his desk and began to write. Words poured out of him, memories of Lena as a child, his regrets, his fears, and finally his gratitude for the second chance he'd been given. "Letters to Lena," he titled the first page. Beneath it he wrote, "A memoir of regret, redemption, and healing, dedicated to the children who saved me." Every evening he added more pages. Sometimes they were stories he remembered about Lena. Other times they were observations about Noah's tiny fingers or Larita's courage. The act of writing became a form of healing, each word a step away from the man he had been. "What are you always writing?" Larita asked one afternoon as they sat in the newly completed garden. "A book," Dino admitted, "about mistakes and second chances." Larita smiled. "Can I read it someday?" "It's for you," Dino said, "and for Noah. So you'll always know how much you changed my life." On that very night, the hospital corridor gleamed with sterile light as nurses prepared Larita for surgery. The room was quiet, except for Dino's steady voice as he sat beside her bed, reading from a worn copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. It was Lena's childhood favorite, and now it brought comfort to her goddaughter. "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. "When you are real, you don't mind being hurt." Dino's voice cracked slightly. He looked up to find Larita watching him, her eyes wide and unafraid despite the IV in her small arm. "Mama Lena used to read this to me," she whispered. "She said the rabbit was brave, just like me." The surgical team arrived, their faces kind but serious. It was time. Larita reached beneath her blanket and pulled out the stuffed bear she'd carried since arriving at Dino's mansion months ago. Lena's childhood bear. "For Noah, if I don't make it," she whispered, pressing it into Dino's hands. Dino's throat tightened, his eyes filling with tears he couldn't hide. "You're going to make it," he said firmly, his voice rough with emotion. "And when you do, you can give this to Noah yourself." But Larita shook her head gently. "Just keep it safe," she insisted. As they wheeled her away, Dino stood frozen, clutching the worn bear to his chest. The stuffed animal still smelled faintly of Lena's perfume, a scent that transported him across decades. In the waiting room, Claire Santiago found him staring blankly at the wall. She sat beside him, offering a cup of coffee he didn't touch. "She's strong," Claire said gently, "stronger than most adults I know." Dino nodded, his fingers still wrapped around the bear's soft paw. "No matter what happens tonight," he said quietly, "I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to helping children like her, like Lena once was." Claire watched his face, noting the determination beneath his fear. "The children's wing at the house, it's just the beginning," Dino continued. "I want to build more, safe places where kids can heal, where they're never alone." "That's beautiful, Dino," Claire said. But right now, the most important thing you're doing is just being here. Staying, fighting, feeling. She placed her hand on his arm. That's the truest form of love. Dino looked down at the bear in his hands. I never gave this to Lena, he admitted. I bought it but couldn't bring myself to show that kind of softness. Miles away, back at the mansion, Noah crawled through the soft grass of Lena's garden. The baby boy, now stronger and full of energy, reached for a bright yellow flower, giggling as Janet the housekeeper watched over him. The evening sky had cleared after days of rain, stars beginning to appear one by one. The garden, once just a patch of earth, now bloomed with life, much like the household itself. Noah pulled himself up on a small bench, his legs stronger than they had been when he first arrived. He babbled happily at a butterfly that landed briefly on a nearby bloom. Something was changing in the garden, in the house, in Dino himself. Before that happened, while Larita was still in surgery, and Dino waited anxiously in the hospital, another chapter of their story was unfolding. Nurse Marina approached Dino in the waiting room, her face gentle but serious. She held a small backpack in her hands, Larita's backpack, the one she'd arrived with months ago. Mr. Graves, she said softly, I was organizing Larita's things for after surgery, and I found something you should see. From the front pocket, she pulled out a sealed envelope, slightly crumpled but carefully preserved. On the front, in childish handwriting, were the words, "For Dino, important." It was hidden in a secret pocket, Nurse Marina explained. She must have been saving it. With trembling fingers, Dino opened the envelope. Inside was a small thumb drive, labeled in handwriting he instantly recognized. Lena's neat, slanted script, "For Dad." Dino stared at it, his heart pounding. I need to see this, he whispered. Go, Claire urged him. I'll stay with Larita. I'll call if anything changes. The drive home felt endless. Dino clutched the thumb drive so tightly his knuckles turned white. His mind raced with possibilities. What had Lena left behind? When had she recorded it? Why had Larita kept it hidden until now? Finally alone in his study, Dino plugged the drive into his computer with shaking hands. A single video file appeared on the screen. He clicked play and held his breath. Lena's face filled the screen. His daughter, older than he remembered her, with tired eyes but the same determined chin. She sat in what looked like a hospital hallway, her voice low but clear. Hi, Dad, she began. And Dino's heart stopped at hearing her call him that, not with anger or bitterness, but with a gentle hope he hadn't heard in decades. I don't know if you'll ever see this, Lena continued. I don't know if I'm strong enough to forgive you, but I want to try. She looked down, gathering her thoughts, then back at the camera with eyes so like his own. Noah was born yesterday, she said, smiling slightly. He's perfect. He has your eyes, did you know that? Sometimes when I look at him, I see you. The you I remember from when I was little, before everything got so hard between us. Dino pressed his hand against the screen as if he could reach through time and touch her face. If you find Noah... Lena's voice broke slightly. I hope he helps you find the good man I once believed you were. The dad who taught me to ride a bike and who hung my drawings on his office wall. Tears streamed down Dino's face as he watched his daughter, his beautiful, brave daughter, offering him grace he didn't deserve. I'm scared, Dad, she admitted, but I'm trying to be brave, for Noah, for myself. She wiped her eyes. Maybe someday we can try again. Maybe it's not too late for us. The video ended, freezing on Lena's hopeful smile. Dino collapsed forward onto his desk, deep sobs racking his body. After all these years, after all the silence and pain, Lena had reached across time to offer him forgiveness. She had called him Dad one last time, not with anger but with hope. After a while, the recovery room door opened with a soft click. Dino stood there, watching the gentle rise and fall of Larita's chest. Her eyes fluttered open, finding his face in the dim light. You're still here, she whispered, her voice raspy from the breathing tube. Dino moved to her bedside, his steps careful and measured. The fear that had gripped him for hours was slowly unwinding, replaced by something lighter: relief, gratitude, hope. "I never left," he said simply. Larita's small hand reached for his, and he took it gently between his palms. Her skin felt paper-thin, but warm with life. "Did I do okay?" she asked. Dino nodded, blinking back tears. "You were braver than anyone I've ever known." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, worn at the edges from years of storage. "I have something for you," he said, "something special." Larita's eyes widened as he opened the box. Inside, nestled against faded blue velvet, lay a delicate silver bracelet. Tiny charms dangled from its links: a heart, a star, a miniature book. "This belonged to Lena when she was about your age," Dino explained, his voice thick with emotion. "See here?" He pointed to the small clasp where the initials LG were engraved in flowing script. "She wore it every day until she was 16. "It's beautiful," Larita whispered. "She would have wanted you to have it," Dino said, carefully fastening it around her thin wrist. "You're carrying on her spirit in ways I never could." Tears welled in Larita's eyes as she touched the bracelet with trembling fingers. The charms caught the light, sending tiny reflections dancing across her hospital gown. The door opened again as Dr. Emilio Hart entered, clipboard in hand. His face broke into a warm smile when he saw Larita awake. "There's our fighter," he said. "The surgery went better than we expected. Your heart is responding well to the repairs." "She'll be okay?" Dino asked, the question hanging between hope and fear. "She'll need several months of recovery and therapy," Dr. Hart replied. "But her prognosis is strong. With proper care and medication, she should lead a normal, healthy life." Dino exhaled slowly, a breath he felt he'd been holding for weeks. "Larita," he said, turning back to her, "there's something else I need to tell you." He took her hand again, his eyes serious but gentle. "I've filed papers to adopt you, legally, permanently." Larita's eyes widened. "You want me? For real?" "You're already mine," Dino said simply. "This just makes it official in everyone else's eyes." Later that afternoon, while Larita rested, Dino met with city officials in the hospital's conference room. Claire Santiago sat beside him, organizing permits and architectural plans across the table. "The zoning board has approved the initial request," a city planner explained, pointing to a blueprint of Dino's estate. "Converting the East Wing into a licensed rehabilitation facility for children is feasible with these modifications." Dino nodded, studying the plans. "And the name?" "Lena's house has been registered with the state," Claire confirmed, sliding a document toward him. "Once construction is complete, you'll be able to house up to 12 children at a time." Dino signed his name on the final permit application, his hand steady and sure. What had once been a cold, empty mansion would soon become a sanctuary for children who had nowhere else to go, just as Larita and Noah had once been. In the meantime, the mansion that once stood as a monument to Dino's isolation began to transform. Workers moved through the halls, tearing down the cold, formal decor and replacing it with warmth and color. The East Wing, once filled with unused guest rooms, now buzzed with activity as walls were repainted in cheerful yellows and blues. "What do you think of this shade for the reading nook?" Dino asked Larita, who sat in her wheelchair by the window, Noah playing with blocks at her feet. Larita touched the paint sample, a soft sky blue. "Mama Lena would have loved it," she said. "She always said blue makes people feel safe." Throughout the mansion, beds were assembled, bookshelves stocked, and play areas crafted. The formal dining room became a communal eating space with round tables instead of the imposing rectangular one where Dino had eaten alone for so many years. Word of Dino Graves' project spread quickly. What began as a trickle of curious volunteers soon became a steady stream of helping hands. Teachers offered to tutor, doctors promised free checkups, and local businesses donated supplies. "I never expected this," Dino confessed to Claire Santiago as they watched a group of college students setting up a computer lab. People I've never met, giving their time. Claire smiled. Your story touches people, Dino. Redemption always does. One afternoon, Larita sat at her new desk, fingers moving slowly across a laptop keyboard. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she typed, paused, and typed again. "What are you working on so hard?" Dino asked, bringing her a cup of hot chocolate. "A story," she replied. "For the Lena's House website. I want to tell people what it's like to find a real home." When she finished, Larita's post, titled "My First Real Home," captured the journey from the shelter with Lena to finding Dino. Her simple, honest words painted a picture of loss, fear, and ultimately, belonging. Claire helped her publish it on the newly created Lena's House blog. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Shares, comments, and donations flooded in. Local news stations requested interviews. Families offered to volunteer. "People are calling you a hero," Claire told Dino, showing him the social media response. Dino shook his head. "The children are the heroes. I'm just trying to make things right." On a bright Tuesday morning, Dino stood before a crowd of journalists on the mansion's front lawn. Behind him, a large sign reading "Lena's House" hung over the entrance. Larita sat beside him, Noah on her lap, both dressed in their best clothes. Cameras flashed as Dino stepped to the microphone. Gone was the cold businessman in expensive suits. Today he wore a simple button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a man who had learned to work with his hands and his heart. 20 years ago, I lost my daughter because I couldn't find the words to tell her I loved her, he began, his voice steady but emotional. I can't rewrite that past, but I can give children a future that Lena would have wanted, one filled with safety, opportunity, and most importantly, love. As he spoke, Larita reached for his hand. He squeezed it gently, drawing strength from the child who had taught him how to be a father again. At dusk, the sky painted itself in shades of purple and gold as a small gathering assembled on the front lawn of what was once known simply as the Graves Mansion. Now, a hand-carved wooden sign reading Lena's House hung above the entrance, adorned with fairy lights that twinkled as darkness approached. Dino Graves stood at the bottom of the steps, his posture no longer rigid but open and welcoming. Gone was the emotionless mask he had worn for decades. In its place was the face of a man transformed by love and purpose. A small bus pulled up to the circular driveway. The doors opened, and 5 children stepped out hesitantly, clutching small backpacks and worn stuffed animals. Their eyes widened at the sight of the massive house. "Welcome to Lena's house," Dino said, kneeling down to be at eye level with the youngest, a girl no older than 6. "I'm Dino. This is your home now for as long as you need it." The children stared at him, unsure and silent. Dino remembered that feeling, the inability to trust, to believe in kindness. He reached out slowly and offered his hand to each child, introducing himself personally, learning their names and telling them something he looked forward to showing them. Larita wheeled herself forward, Noah secure in her lap. "I was scared too when I first came," she told them, "but now I'd like to show you around, if that's okay." The children followed her, drawn to the confident girl who seemed to understand their fears. Larita led them through bright hallways with colorful artwork, bedrooms with soft blankets and stuffed animals on each pillow, a kitchen with cookies cooling on racks, and finally outside to a beautiful garden. "This is Lena's garden," she explained, stopping by a bed of vibrant flowers. "It was planted for someone brave, my mama Lena. She saved people just like all of you are brave too." Larita smiled at the children. "You can plant your dreams here if you want. That's what this place is for." Later that night, after the children had been settled into their rooms, Dino sat alone in his study. On his desk lay a folded piece of paper, a letter from Larita. He opened it with trembling fingers and read, "Dear Dino, thank you for becoming what she believed you could be. You didn't just open your door, you opened your heart. Mama Lena would be so proud of you. I am. Love, Larita." Tears fell freely down Dino's face, but for the first time in decades, they weren't tears of guilt or regret. They were tears of joy, of a man who had finally found his way home. Weeks later, golden sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Dino's office. The once sterile room had transformed. its walls now adorned with framed children's drawings, photographs, and handwritten notes. What had once been a monument to isolation was now a shrine to connection. Dino sat at his desk, pen poised over the final page of a thick manuscript. The cover page read, "Letters to Lena," in simple, elegant font. He wrote the final sentence with careful deliberation. "You gave me a second chance, and now I'll keep giving them." He closed the book gently, running his hand over its cover. The journey from the man he was to the man he'd become felt both impossibly long and remarkably swift. Every page contained not just his words to Lena, but the story of his awakening. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The door creaked open to reveal Larita, standing tall despite her recent surgery, holding Noah's small hand in hers. The boy had grown stronger, his cheeks fuller, eyes brighter. "We thought you might want to come see the new flowers," Larita said, her voice steady and warm. "They just started blooming this morning." Dino smiled, rising from his chair. "I wouldn't miss it for anything." He crossed the room and lifted Noah into his arms. The boy giggled, patting Dino's cheeks with tiny hands. Together, the three made their way through the house, now alive with the sounds of children's laughter, and out to Lena's garden. They knelt beside the newest flower bed planted just after Larita's surgery. Purple and yellow blooms stretched toward the sun, their petals still unfurling. "They need water," Noah announced importantly, reaching for the small watering can. Dino helped him lift it, and together they watched the water cascade onto the thirsty soil. Behind them, the grounds of Lena's house bustled with activity. Children playing tag across the lawn, volunteers reading stories under shade trees, Claire Santiago discussing expansion plans with architects. As they tended the garden together, Lena's voice seemed to float on the breeze, words from her final video that Dino now knew by heart. "If he finds you, I know he'll find himself again too." And he had. In helping these children find their way, Dino Graves had finally found his own. If you enjoyed the story of Dino and Larita, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. If you enjoyed the story of Dino and Larita, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.